نصيب وجاءه قومه يهرعون إليه ومن قبل كانوا يعملون السيئات قال يا قوم هؤلاء بناتي هن أطهر لكم فاتقوا الله ولا تخزوني في ضيفي أليس منكم رجل رشيد قالوا لقد علمت ما لنا في بناتك من حق وإنك لتعلم ما نريد قال لو أن لي بكم قوة أو آوي إلى ركن شديد قالوا يا لوط إنا رسل ربك لن يصلوا إليك فأسر بأهلك بقطع من الليل ولا يلتفت منكم أحد إلا امرأتك إنه مصيبها ما أصابهم إن موعدهم الصبح أليس الصبح بقريب فلما جاء أمرنا جعلنا عاليها سافلها وأمطرنا عليها حجارة من سجيل منضود مسومة عند ربك وما هي من الظالمين ببعيد صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the 6th night of our lecture series, Decoding the Mahdi. Tonight's topic is the hierarchy and the Mahdi, talking about the ijtihadi model. Can we welcome Shaykh Arif with the loud salawat? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. Picking up from where we left off yesterday, we were talking about the hierarchical structures and the authority in the absence of the Imam. We began by giving the ahadith, giving authority to the transmitters of the hadith in the absence of the Imam. We said this naturally culminates also in the authority of the interpreters of the hadith. Now the rationale there was that initially, then when the people faced disputes or questions, the responses were given in terms of the direct statements of the Imam. Now we see with the passage of time that it's not as simple as providing a hadith for every event that faces us. It's more a question of interpreting the ahadith. It's more a question of contrasting conflicting ahadith and trying to establish which is the most accurate one. Or we have situations, and from the hadith we see the principle and then we apply it to the given situation that is in question. At times then the whole issue is, well, how does reason deal with this? What have the predecessors said? How have they understood it? What does the Quran say? And this gives then birth to a model of interpretation. This is what we call ijtihad. And we said the same hadith that give authority to the transmitters of hadith give authority to the interpreters of the Sharia law. We made a comment that the authority given to the transmitters and the authority given to the interpreters of the Sharia was in their capacity as narrating accurately from the Imams, or in their capacity as understanding accurately from the Quran and from the Imams, from reason and from things such as consensus, so on and so forth. We also stated that the model of ijtihad that we have also had some beginnings in the time of the Prophet, and it's a natural event that the interpretation takes place and we apply it to different areas of life as and how we need it. So somebody asked me if I can clarify the meaning of ijtihad. So ijtihad is to try and understand what is the Sharia response to any given situation that we are facing. Sharia response comes from the Sharia sources, which are the Quran and the Hadith and reason primarily. And then we have consensus and so on and so forth. But one of the things about the ijtihadi model that we have at present that has evolved over the last 1,000 years is that it is very literalistic. It's the face value appreciation of texts and then its application. Why is it the face value appreciation of text? Think about this carefully. It makes perfect sense from the traditional sense. How? Because initially the people were supposed to respond to the question in accordance with the verses of the Quran directly, or in accordance with the statements of the Prophet, or in accordance with the statement of the Imam directly. So therefore, whichever method of interpretation that evolves from this assumption that we have to give direct responses in accordance with what the texts are saying will be a method that seeks to understand the text accurately at its face value meaning. So therefore, when you say, how long is the fast? Everybody will say the fast is until night. And what is the meaning of night? Well, the literal meaning of night in the time of the Prophet was the darkness that we associate with night time. And that was the model of ijtihad that was developed, and it is still current, a face value appreciation of the text. Here we stated that what if we can put this particular question, that which was accurately appreciated 1400 years ago at the level of face value appreciation of the text may no longer be accurate in a context that is alien to that. Let me give an example for this. At that time, we had a 12 to 14 hour day and 12 hour to 10 hour night. Today, we have a day that stretches to 20 hours, in some regions 22 hours, in some regions to 22 and a half or 23 hours. And night is reduced to 1.5 hours. The ijtihadi model, therefore, will stipulate a face value interpretation means that fast throughout that day until the darkness of the night, and that is the literal understanding of the text. Now what we are saying here is, what if the literal understanding of the text was valid in its own context, and beyond its own context, what the text was implying was a meaningful fast in terms of a conventional day. So here therefore we question as to whether the literalistic ijtihadi model is accurate outside its own context. And then we brought in that particular argument that authority was given to the ijtihadi model not based on its face value understanding of the Sharia text, but on the basis of its accurate appreciation of the Sharia law. And there is a huge difference between the two things. An accurate interpretation of the Sharia law may not be its literal understanding in every context. Can you see that? So when you go towards the northern context, the day becomes a different meaning altogether. You ask them, well, how long do you work for? They would say, well, we work for 12 hours of the day. We'll say, but it's still daylight for another 10 hours. They say, well, it can be daylight or nighttime. Our day is 12 hours. So here what we say is that authority is given not to a particular model, but authority was given to accurate appreciation. So if another model is far more accurate in appreciating the Sharia standpoint, then that is authorized equally. So here it is that we questioned the ijtihadi model. So why can't it be possible that with the evolution of the human mind and human experience and human expertise, that we cannot find different models of interpretation of the Sharia text? And why can they not all integrate as one, as the collective intellect, and form that Sharia authority that is ordained by the 12th Imam? Let me explain this a bit further. Today, if we were to ask dietitians and medics, what is a meaningful fast? And if they were to say a meaningful fast is a fast that lasts up till 16 hours, and that is good for your body, and we have empirical data and research to substantiate this, then why can we not say that a 16-hour fast or 14-hour fast was what the text was actually alluding to? But that 16-hour fast in that context was contained within the daytime of that time. So therefore we will see ijtihad is ordained in the sense of it accurately yielding the intent of God, not ijtihad as a particular model of interpretation. Let me give another example. The literalistic model of ijtihad will say interest is a prohibition. In today's day and age, we see that interest is very productive in many instances. Is it better, I often ask this, that a person pays rent till 60 years and does not own a house and dies? Or is it better that a person gets a mortgage and pays less than the rent that they would pay, and within 20 years that house is theirs? Common sense says the latter is better. So why does Sharia say interest is haram? The literalistic model will say that the Quran is saying usury is haram, and the literal interpretation means that usury is not allowed no matter what its kind or however it's packaged. And in addition to that, working in banks that process interest is also haram. And it has many, many ramifications. Now here, what if we were to ask that, hold on, usury is haram for the name usury, or is it haram for the effects of usury? So what if you can have interest that is minus the evil effects? Is it still haram because it shares the same name? Surely here an economist should be asked. The ijtihad in this instance belongs to an economist. The economist will say, by the principles of righteousness and justice that the Quran is saying, that establish justice. Justice is that you give everything its rightful due. We can say that the person who gives money has a right to derive some benefit. They are lending you money, they have a right to get some benefit from it, because otherwise they could have invested it. And if they can derive some money that is within acceptable boundaries, and you too can benefit from that money, then that might be called interest, but it is minus the evil effects of interest that were associated with interest or usury in the time of the Prophet, and therefore this is halal. So what we are saying here is that the ijtihadi model was ordained due to its accurate appreciation of the Sharia rule, not because of a particular process of deduction. And their particular process of deduction was a literalistic process. So we are saying yes, in that context it worked perfectly because those were the conditions in which the Sharia was delivered. The context changes, the authority shifts from a particular model to another model, and this is in keeping with the conceptual Mahdiism, that it is always evolving. It is always bringing human beings to the fruition of their potential, bringing about a just society that is productive and more humane. Will anybody say today that slavery is an eternal law? Because the face value appreciation of the text will say that slavery is allowed. I pointed this out a few years ago. According to this, therefore, the criticism of ISIS is unfounded, because the ISIS will say the literal appreciation of the verses of the Quran allows for slavery, beating of women, marital rape, and according to hadith, infant marriages. Here we are seeing that ijtihad is only ordained in the context of it arriving at accurate understanding of Sharia, not a particular method of deduction. Now we say, one of the functions of a mujtahid is to handle khums. And of course, we're developing this thing in the topic that we have discussed today, which is directly based with this one that we are finishing. The mujtahid handles the khums. We can ask a reasonable question here, that financial institutions, can they not do a better job of collection and distribution of khums in a more fair manner? What stops people from investing khums and creating more money? It's a simple question. Is it better to keep a community begging, or is it better to create more money from the money and to see to their primary needs? Menial necessities and needs are seen to, and therefore then we can invest in people's education and in their businesses. It's a very simple thing. So you think, okay, my reason says this, but Sharia says it's opposite. Here there is a conflict, therefore a bigger conflict, that God is not in line with the human growing ethos and human trend. So these are legitimate questions that we can ask, that the authority given to ijtihadi model and the authority given to the person who is a practitioner of the ijtihadi model is done so squarely in accordance with their accurate appreciation of the law of God, not a particular individual in question or a model of interpretation. And I hope that can put the discussion of yesterday to rest, as we want to progress now from here onwards. So we stated these structures of authority. In my absence, look at the transmitters of the hadith. We stated that. We developed that and we said that the transmitters also means the interpreters. Now if an interpreter is also being made a point of reference, and that interpreter is the marja, that then bears hugely on the level of authority that the marja has. And this brings us to the notion of wilayah, authority. But authority within the jurisprudential sense, not authority in the sense of the spiritual realm. And as we go there, we bring to mind, and I'm going to clarify what we are going to talk about today, but we bring to mind as a prelude the whole notion that was given yesterday, that Muzaffar quotes in Aqaiduna, and it comes from a hadith that we narrated yesterday. Ar-rad alayhim karrad alayna warrad alayna karrad alallah. To reject the authority of a faqih is rejecting our authority. And rejection of our authority is the rejection of God's authority. Rejection of God's authority is association with God. Finish. We stated in the clarification of this hadith that, wait a minute, the context in which this hadith came was about a person who knew the hadith of the Imam, and at the point of dispute was chosen to adjudicate or to arbitrate. And the Imam said, if he then arbitrates in accordance with what we have taught him from the Quran and the hadith of the Imam, and you reject it, it's a rejection of us, and it's a rejection of God. That was the context. But think about it carefully. There's a flip to it as well. But hold on. He is passing the judgment based on the teachings of the Prophet and his family. And the Imam is saying, if you reject it, it's my rejection. Can this not also hold true of a person who does not find a direct hadith or a verse relating to the type of problem, but he interprets it through a particular model of ijtihad and then applies it, and then you reject it, isn't that the rejection of Imam as well and of Allah? The answer is yes, that's plausible. Can you see that? Yesterday, we undermined it, didn't we? We said the antagonists are saying that this hadith is curtailed to the authority of a transmitter who is adjudicating directly in accordance with the statement of the Imam. What I'm saying here is, think about it carefully. There is a situation in which the transmitter does not find a direct text from the Quran or the hadith dealing with the situation. But that person can easily derive the rule for that situation from the body of hadith and the text that he has. And therefore their rejection, is it not tantamount to the rejection of the Imam and tantamount to the rejection of God? The answer is, at the face value of it, it is. So here we come to the authority of the marja and the authority of the wali faqih, which we are going to explain in a little while. I just want to give the other side of it. The authority becomes binding, absolutely, unless we know otherwise. Unless we know the inaccuracy of that judgment. Can you see that? If we are saying that the authority is given to an individual or a model in terms of its accuracy, then the authority only holds true until you do not know of its inaccuracy. Is that coming through? Is that coming through to everybody? If not, just shake your head and I can just take you back. Okay. I need to get this clear before we go on, yes? The Imam says that in my absence, look at the people who narrate my hadith. Another text says that to reject the judgment of a person who has learnt my hadith is like rejecting me. What we are saying here is that the authority is given to the transmitter, and the rejection of the authority of the transmitter is the rejection of the authority of the Imam himself. We said, but it naturally follows that the transmitter has a brain. Does that naturally follow the transmitter has a brain? Sometimes. Some people just transmit. Some people have a brain as well and transmit, right? So the transmitter who has a brain and who is able to decipher the inner meaning of the hadith and then apply it to a situation that is not directly mentioned in the hadith and then gives a judgment for it, the rejection of this judgment is similarly tantamount to the rejection of the Imam. Because whatever this man is saying has been implied by the Imam anyway. Can you see that? So it is true, rejection of the authority of a mujtahid who is either transmitting or extrapolating the law in accordance with the process of ijtihad is a rejection of the Imam himself. When? Only when we do not know of its inaccuracy. Can you see that? Because the authority is only vested in that person in accordance with accuracy of understanding the Sharia law. Can you see that? So when a mujtahid gives a fatwa, let us say we had these sort of fatwas in the 70s, that this is a state which is not an Islamic state. And according to that particular mindset that we had previously, the world is divided into an Islamic world and a non-Islamic world. In non-Islamic world, their property and wealth has no sacredness. If it has no sacredness, then you can take from them. Because as you take from them, you are weakening an infidel state. So stealing from them does not constitute a Sharia violation. Now, when this fatwa is passed, we know intuitively that this is inaccurate. So therefore, the fatwa holds no authority there. Because we know intuitively that this is not the state which is antagonist to God or to the teachings of God. In fact, it's more Islamic than many of the Islamic states. Can you see that? We have liberty to do whatever we want, to organize ourselves and even preach the religion of Islam. In many of the countries we find that Sunnis are not allowed to preach their faith, Shias are not allowed to preach their faith. Maybe this is more Islamic than all of those countries, right? So intuitively we know that this fatwa is inaccurate, and therefore the fatwa loses authority. From here now, we go into this discussion of authority and authority of the faqih. The authority of faqih is directly based on the authority given by those texts to the ruwat of hadith, the transmitters of hadith, and later on their interpreters, and later on they have their authority based on their knowledge base. So we want to discuss what is the meaning of wilayah in the sense of faqih. What types of wilayah are there? The limited one, the absolute one. Why do we need to create an Islamic state? Why should the faqih be the one who heads the Islamic state? Is it the case that the authority is absolute and cannot be opposed to? And then if so, then why? Is it a case that there can be other authority structures that understand the want of God better than the one that faqih is understanding in his own model? Can we at all impose an Islamic Sharia law without the will of the people? Does it all add up? And then, was it valid in a given context? And now when the context has moved, can we have a different understanding? So as we go into this talk, I will give a little prelude. As we saw in the ijtihadi model, we are seeing that actually integrating different types of learning based on the broad principles of the Sharia is a far more accurate ijtihadi model than the one at present, for the present context, where people are spread in four corners of the world, where they are very different in the way their societies operate and the system of rights is. We need this expert integration together with the mujtahid's understanding, together with a different model of ijtihad or form and essence. All of them integrated properly, and all of it is in a state of flux, and everything is flowing, constantly changing. With that prelude in mind, we come to wilayah. Wilayah means authority. Authority is natural, it's a product of the human condition. A father inevitably has authority over the minors, the children. You cannot deny that. The authority, in essence, is interwoven within the human condition. We have authority over our belongings and we can do whatever we want with it. We have authority over people, like insane people who don't know what to do. The community will take authority. So the faqih takes authority in two ways. This is how the jurisprudential argument is set. Either in what we call umur hisbiya khassa. Fuqaha have defined this as the faqih having authority over all those things upon whom there is no authority. Such as what? Such as children without any guardians. Such as insane people, such as endowments. When the purpose of endowment is lost, who has authority over this? What else do we do with it? This is known as authority in the limited sense of the faqih. Why does faqih have authority in there? Because we want to lead our lives in accordance with the pleasure of God. Who knows the pleasure of God more than the faqih, who is acquainted with the text of the Quran and the statement of the Prophet and the Imams? That is the traditional argument. What is absolute wilayah? Absolute wilayah is that the faqih has absolute authority. The same level of authority that the Prophet or the Imam has in the absence of the Prophet and the Imam. We can say, well, Imam never had absolute authorities all of them, they always had limited authority. There is another thing. No. Faqih has absolute authority over the state once the state is established. Why should the state be established in the first place? When you have a group of people who call themselves Muslims and they want to lead their lives in accordance with the command of God, then the only person who can head such a state is a faqih in the absence of the Prophet or an imam. And they are obliged to create that state. Now I want to go into these arguments more fully and more thoroughly. Now, there are a variety of opinions here about state and faqih. And we call them theories. Now I know people get offended when we call it the theory of Wilayatul Faqih, but they shouldn't get offended. The faqih has wilayah. That is a given. But the extent and the scope of wilayah is up for discussion, and that is why we call it the theory of Wilayatul Faqih. The faqih has wilayah. Is it absolute or not? Like Sayyid Sistani, he is a faqih, he is a quietist. He intervenes in the affairs of the state and yet does not head the state. Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may Allah save both of them, is a faqih. He is the head of state and has absolute authority. This is another notion of wilayat faqih. Then you have a notion that is coming out now, that wali faqih should be a constitutional wali faqih, like the constitutional monarchy we have here. These ideas of how the wilayah of the faqih should function within a state where the people are Muslims is something for which we have a lot of opponents and a lot of proponents. A lot of people supporting each theory, a lot of people opposing each theory, and that's why we call it the theory of Wilayatul Faqih. It's not to offend anybody. It's the way we phrase things, and it's most accurately phrased. So now, we want to ask, why is a faqih supposed to head a Muslim state? The answer is, when there is a group of Muslims, they are ordained to mold their lives in accordance with the dictates of God and the Quran and the Prophet. So they are to create an Islamic state. The other examples I give is that, well, we are duty bound to do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi Anil Munkar. Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi Anil Munkar can only be done through the agency of an Islamic state. Why should the faqih head the Islamic state? Because nobody knows more than the faqih what is required by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he is the only one who can head the Islamic state. What are the powers of faqih therefore? The absolute wilayah says the power of faqih is the power of the Prophet and the Imam. Now, in Iran, that power translates as the faqih appoints the jurists to the guardian council. He appoints the highest judicial authority in the country. He holds supreme command over the armed forces by exercising some functions. He signs the certificate of appointment of the president. In the national interest, he can dismiss the president. On the recommendation of the Supreme Courts, he grants amnesty. This is like absolute power of the faqih. That's the one thing. Now, think about it further. If the faqih sits in the place of the Prophet and the Imam, refusal to uphold the authority of the faqih is tantamount to refusing the authority of the Imam and the Prophet. So that gives absolute authority to the faqih. Now think about this. We need to come through this somehow slowly. The arguments are there. There are several arguments. That if the Prophet said something to you, would you oppose it? The answer is no. Why? Because the Prophet, Allah says, Atiullah wa atiur Rasul. Isn't it? Yeah, I can't oppose the Prophet. If the Imam says something, would you oppose it? No, according to our theology. Atiullah wa atiur Rasul wa ulil amr minkum. And they are the ulul amr, and I want to go into this just now. Fine. If the faqih sits in the place of the Imam in his absence, and he's been ordained as the transmitter, as the interpreter, as the one who gets authority on the basis of his knowledge, then opposition of the faqih, is it not tantamount to the opposition of the Imam and the Prophet? The answer is yes. So that's an equation that is there. Now let's go into this a little bit more. There are two questions that arise here. Did the Prophet and the Imam have absolute authority themselves? That's the first thing. Will the 12th Imam have absolute authority himself? Or will he hold himself accountable? Were they as legislators, or were they bound to follow the legislation given by God? These are questions that need to be answered. Is the Imam himself bound by the law? Or is his authority unquestionable? If his authority is unquestionable, is it because his authority is very, very accurate? If that's the case, then we begin to see a distinction between the Imam and the faqih. Can you see that? If the Imam's authority, like the Prophet's authority, is based on absolute accuracy, then can you ascertain the absolute accuracy of the faqih as well? This is the point that needs to be clarified. Now, so why should faqih have this absolute authority? Let's go through the text. One of the texts that justifies this. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu atiullah wa atiur Rasul wa ulul amr minkum. O you who believe, give obedience to Allah. It's unrestricted. Atiullah, give obedience to Allah. Wa atiur Rasul, and give obedience to the Rasul. We ask a question. Is the obedience of the Prophet the same as the obedience to Allah, or can we make a distinction between the two as an absolute and non-absolute? The other verse says, Man ata'a ar-Rasul faqad ata'a Allah, man yuti'a ar-Rasul faqad ata'a Allah. He who gives obedience to the Prophet, gives to the Messenger, gives obedience to Allah. So it seems that whatever the Prophet says is whatever Allah is saying. Now this can be questioned. This can be questioned unless the Prophet says that no, here I'm saying this of my own accord, like the instruction of the Prophet to the Medinan community at the time of the Battle of Uhud, where the Messenger said, Salamullah alayhi, that stay within Medina and receive the oncoming army. They protested, they said, no, we will fight outside Medina, and the Prophet gave in and they went outside. And the Prophet did not say to them that you are being disloyal to God. So there is a possibility of a dichotomy as to where the Prophet's ita'ah is the ita'ah of Allah, and where the Prophet is giving his understanding, but which is not tantamount to denial of the ita'ah of Allah. Can you see that? So there is a place where to deny obedience to the Prophet is denying obedience to Allah. But there is a space possibly where denial of the authority of the Prophet is not the denial of authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we saw in that case. And maybe there are other examples, and we need to go into that very thoroughly, but in a simplistic manner. Is the authority of the Prophet the same as the authority of Allah? The answer is, we will say yes. He who gives obedience to the Prophet gives obedience to Allah at the face value. So now we come. وَأُولُو الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ, and those in authority from you. Is their authority the same as the authority of the Messenger, which is the same as the authority of Allah? Here we have deliberation. Ibn Abbas says that Ulul Amr, from a Sunni source, that Ulul Amr are the fuqaha who will give us what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, and the ulama, they know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And they give the reason. وَلَوْ رُدُّوهُ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ وَإِلَى أُولِي الْأَمْرِ لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ. In their dispute, had they reverted to the Messenger of Allah and those in authority amongst them, then indeed they would have let them know the accuracy by deriving the accurate understanding. So Ulul Amr don't seem to be any leaders of the people. They seem to be the scholars who know the truth. And Ibn Abbas evidences it in this way. Then we have a hadith from Imam Mahdi Salamullah alayh, that this is the authority of the Imam when he deals in accordance with what is taught by Allah and His Messenger. So Ulul Amr's authority seems to be directly in line with the authority of the Messenger and of Allah. Allama Tabatabai has a lengthy discussion in his Mizan according to what Ulul Amr are. He proves their Isma, infallibility, and he proves that these Ulul Amr are the Imams. Why does he have to go out of his way to do this? Because the verse concludes, وَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ. Now this verse doesn't end there. The verse says, the verse reads, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنكُمْ. If you believe in Allah, so on and so forth. And then it ends with this. فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ. And after that you dispute in accordance with anything else, فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ. Then revert it to Allah and His Messenger. So the obvious meaning here is that in the absence of the Messenger, when you dispute with the Ulul Amr, then revert the whole issue to Allah and the Messenger. Can you see this? Let me take it back a step. It's important we understand these things very clearly. Let's take a step back. We are talking about the need of establishing an Islamic state in order to pursue the good pleasure of God. Yes? We are talking about the leadership of the Islamic state. It has to be somebody who is endowed with the knowledge of what God wants. That can only be the Messenger. In the absence of the Messenger, the Imam. In the absence of the Imam, the Faqih. So Faqih has the absolute authority. And he is amongst the Ulul Amr, and his authority cannot be denied. Now, we want to see if there's an objection in this rationale and reasoning. The verse brought for justification by some is, O you who believe, give obedience to Allah, His Messenger and Ulul Amr. The end of the verse says, and if you have a dispute, then revert the matter to Allah and His Messenger, to Allah and the Messenger. So at the face value, it means if you have a dispute with the Ulul Amr, then revert it. Can you see that? So if an Ulul Amr is saying something, now incidentally, the Sunni sources quote that the Prophet sent an emissary. He went to a place and he said, dig a trench, fill it with firewood, and now jump inside it. So here was a dispute. People will say, well, why should we jump inside it and burn ourselves? The answer is, follow the Ulul Amr. The Ulul Amr has told you, follow him. There's a dispute. Revert it to Allah and His Messenger. Yes? The Messenger will tell you what is more accurate when you have dispute with the Ulul Amr. That's one interpretation. Tabatabai comes out with a different interpretation, which is phenomenal. And that is that no, what the verse is saying is, give obedience to Allah, to the Messenger of Allah, and to the Ulul Amr. And now when you have a dispute, then the Ulul Amr will deal that dispute in accordance with what Allah and the Messenger have taught. Can you see that? So the obedience is due to the Ulul Amr, because the Ulul Amr will tell you that look, in this dispute, this is what Allah and His Messenger are saying. Allah is in the Quran and His Messenger is in the Seerah of the Prophet and the Sunnah of the Prophet. If that is the interpretation, then the authority of the Ulul Amr becomes absolutely binding. Finish. Are you getting it? Because the ulul amr is the one who will then deal with the issue in accordance with his superior and supreme understanding of the dictates of Sharia. Can you see that? Until here, everything is watertight. Until here, everything is watertight. The next link proves to be problematic. Can the faqih be given equal status to the ulul amr as the imam? We will say, no doubt, the faqih is ulul amr. We can't doubt it. If the imam has said, farja'u ila ruwati hadithina, as transmitter, and later on they become interpreters, and later on they become experts, yes, legists, then at that point the faqih is a part of ulul amr. We can't deny it. However, is it also true that the faqih as an ulul amr enjoys the same capacity as the imam enjoys? Let's reason with this. Atiullah wa atiur rasul wa ulul amr minkum. Fine. And now when you dispute, then refer it to Allah and the Messenger. So ulul amr is doing that. And ulul amr's final say has to be taken because ulul amr has a superior knowledge. But that is the ulul amr from Imam Ali until the 12th Imam. Can we say the same for a faqih, that his rule is infallible? The very fact that two mujtahids can disagree in terms of a course of action, in terms with their interpretation, shows that the ulul amr in this instance are not in agreement. Can you see this? So we can say mujtahid X has limited wilayah. Mujtahid Y has absolute wilayah. Why? Because mujtahid X does not believe in the absolute wilayah. He believes in the separation of the church and the state. But mujtahid Y does not believe in this distinction between church and the state. He says they have to be together. Immediately here, both of them are ulul amr and both of them have a difference of opinion. Because mujtahid X is advising the state how you should run yourself in accordance with the teachings of the Sharia. He's advising, and the state is then governing itself without the mujtahid having that authority. In the other one, the mujtahid is telling them how the state should be run and having the final say. So immediately, both of them are ulul amr and both of them have a distinction. So the fact that they can have a distinction just shows that their level of understanding of Islam is not as superior as the understanding of the ulul amr in the case of the divine guides. So that's the first distinction we make. Two, it proves as well that the ulul amr's authority is based on their superior knowledge. Superior knowledge of what? Of what Allah and His Messenger are requiring of us at any given time in any area of life. Can you say that a faqih with the literalistic method of appreciation of the text has that superior understanding that the Prophet's family had? Let me take you through a scenario. In Mina, millions of Hajis slaughter animals. The Quran says, eat from it and feed the poor and the needy. Eat from it and feed the one who does not need it. Yes, that's what the Quran says. We, from a literalistic understanding of these verses and hadith, we slaughter in Mina. It's not our problem. We've done our duty. The meat can go to waste. And mountains of meat is buried under the sand. There is a hadith of Imam Sadiq, take the meat out of Mina. This hadith is in conflict with the explicit instruction given by the Prophet and the first Imam, that the meat of Mina should be in Mina. So the Rawi says to the Imam, but your grandfather said it's opposite. He said at that point the Muslim community was very poor, and in the days in which they lived in Mina, they needed meat to sustain them. Now the community is affluent, the meat is not needed in Mina, take it out. Now the literalistic model will say, here's a conflict, how do we resolve it? From their method they would resolve by saying that Imam Sadiq meant the mustahab qurbani, do it outside Mina. Can you see that? Now in the form of, within the model of form and essence, we'll say, no, The essence is to sacrifice something that you hold dear and is valuable. Then eat of that sacrifice and feed the poor. You can't do that in Mina, so slaughter anywhere else in the world. If you are 100 Hajis, 2 or 3 animals that you've slaughtered, bring it back and eat of yourselves. Because nobody's poor anymore in Makkah. But the rest of it, slaughter them in poor countries. That is an accurate understanding, not an understanding that you just slaughter and let it be buried in the sand. So the question comes that the wilayah given to the faqih was not because he is the faqih in the traditional sense and that he can understand the literal meaning of the text. The wilayah authority given to the faqih is in the capacity of the faqih being able to accurately understand the want of God. I'm going to conclude here because my time has finished. Akhund Khurasani, in his Sharh to the Makasib of Shaykh Ansari, says that it is not at all a given that the Prophet and the Imam have absolute authority. They are bound by the law, they're not legislators. Unless they are giving the law of God, they are bound by the law. They just can't go and divorce any man from any woman and take anybody's belongings and suspend anybody and so on and so forth. No, their authority is also limited. What I'm saying is, think about the human evolutionary trend. Isn't it better that Khums is institutionalized? Today we have welfare system. Orphans and orphanages, they're being looked after. There's welfare system, there's education. We are looking after people who are insane. Think about this. This is all institutions. We don't need a single person to head them. Human beings are far more sophisticated. We are far more evolved. How to run a state, what is a just economy, what is a better social system. There is nothing of this sort within the Quran or the text of the Prophet and his family. All the Quran and the family of the Prophet and the Prophet give are broad principles of productive and just and righteous existence. Why can't the collective body, in line with progression and the theory of being liberated from within and fulfilling their human potential, not acquire the state of determining their own state? We have democracy. We can have waliya faqih coexisting with democracy. We can have constitutional wilayat faqih. If it works in a particular region like Iran, then that's good and we salute it and we take pride in it. But it does not mean that that has any sacredness in it. It works for the time to which it works. When the context changes, everything changes. I do not for 1 minute believe, according to the text, that the 12th Imam is going to come and rule over the global humanity in this particular fashion. He will create institutions in which people take charge of their own affairs, because the final goal in terms with the broader Mahdi theory, conceptual Mahdiism, is that humanity arrives at the fruition of its potential. If the human beings are to be treated like babies at every instance, they need somebody to tell them what to do and what not to do. It's a full failure. And that is why the hadith says that when the 12th Imam comes, he will not make you pray or fast or go to Hajj or give zakat and khums. You will be sophisticated enough to do all of those things anyway. He will merely come and put his hand over your heads and drive your intellects to its perfection. He will lead a pluralistic community and he will enable them. Do you really think that the 12th Imam will come and have no accountability in what he does? He will have full transparency and accountability. For that is the best way to govern a state, and that is the best way to teach people how to govern themselves. I'm finished with this sentiment. Imam Ali Salamullah alayh used to take a broom and sweep the Baytul Mal, so that no penny of the wealth of the poor remains inside the treasury. Hussein ibn Ali Salamullah alayh said, when the bay'ah was demanded of him, Ya aballah lana dhalik wa rasuluhu wal mu'minun, Allah does not allow me to pledge allegiance to such a person. Neither did his messenger, nor do the believers. Hussein ibn Ali Salamullah alayh is gesturing at a three-way responsibility. Responsibility to God, the messenger, and the community of the believers. Not for 1 minute I do not think that the 12th Imam will come and be an authoritarian. will just say, do as I tell you and don't ask me. No, people will ask him question because the Prophet did not impose his authority. Authority cannot be imposed. People gave him authority. When people were not giving Hussein ibn Ali authority, he said, I will leave you. Similarly, the 12th Imam cannot come in by force, lead a community. They will have full freedom. The mourning witnesses the collective armies coming into battle. By the early evening, Hussein's numbers have diminished, Salamullah alayhi. And as per the Arab custom, they were now engaging in single combat. At that point, only the family of Imam Hussein remained. Bibi Zainab, she prepared 2 of her sons to go into the battlefield. Either they were both Bibi Zainab's children, or they were both Abdullah's children from another wife, or one of them was hers and one wasn't. We have this discrepancy. She prepares them. We read that she puts new garments upon them. She dresses them up, combs their hair, and maybe perfumes them. And I'm seeing this daughter of Ali and Fatima Salamullah alayhima, and her resilience and defiance. And this is what makes her her. She's not a defeatist person. She says, no, I will take full pride in giving my children, especially for my brother. We find this scene depicted by the Zakirin, and they take poetic license, that when the 2 children go to Imam Hussein, he turns his face away and he weeps. Zainab, surmising this, says to Fizza, ask my brother to come to me. He goes to her. She looks at him, but he bows his head. She says, oh brother, look into my eyes. And then she says, do you think my children are dearer to Allah than you are? Shall you not give me this privilege to offer something in the way of God, in your defense? But Abdullah may not be pleased, dear sister. They are his children as well. Oh Hussein, he ran to me in Makkah, and he brought these 2 to me. And he said, I can't accompany you due to my ill age and due to my ill health and my age. Take these 2. Then she embraced him. And she said, oh Hussein, I give them with the wholesomeness of my heart. In each other's embrace, they wept for a while. Imam Hussein settled them. Bibi Zainab had told them that, remember, if you find your way to Umar ibn Sa'd, put him to death. If you find your way to the water, do not drink of it. My brother Hussein is thirsty, bring something back for him instead. On and Muhammad are fighting. The Arab break their custom. They surround them. On is struck upon his blessed head. He falls to the ground. Muhammad goes to him. He says, oh brother, I am soon to come to you. As he laments at the body of his brother, he is attacked. And he tastes Shahada. As Hussein hears his final farewell, he runs to the battlefield. Hamid ibn Muslim narrates that Hussein lifts both the children, one in his right arm and one in his left. And as he brings them to the camps, every woman comes out to greet Al-Hussein and to receive the bodies of the martyrs, apart from Zainab. Abbas Qummi speculates that she would always be the first one. At this point, she does not want to embarrass her brother. Hussein places the two bodies alongside the bodies of all the companions and his son Akbar. And then he goes into the tent to console his sister. When he enters the tent, she is in sajda praising Allah and not wanting to embarrass his brother. But we find this narration that Hamid ibn Muslim says, on the 11th, I found everybody attended to by a woman crying and lamenting. There were two bodies that were unattended and nobody was crying upon them. I asked, were these without any guardians? I was told, no, they are the children of Hussein, and they are the children of Zainab. I went towards Zainab. I said, Zainab, shall you not come to the body of your children and weep on them and bid them farewell? Zainab looks at me and she says, oh Muslim, how do I leave my brother in this state? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة.
Thank you for the lecture, Shaykh. We've got a number of questions. So I think this was a question which followed on from yesterday's lecture and a bit of today's lecture. So the first one is, there are speculations about the whole notion of naibs of the Imam. Can you elaborate on the authenticity of this?
The thing is that for me there is no reason to doubt them. And unless somebody can prove that they gained greatly from concocting and fabricating this lie, it would have to be taken as true. Why should they be lying? Why should they be fabricating something for 67 years? If that was indeed the case, and they had vested interest and they were receiving money in the name of the 12th Imam, then why did the major occultation start after 67 years? Why couldn't they have continued it for a few more years? Why could they not have continued it for 100, 200 years? Especially when we know that Homs was buried after the commencement of the major occultation. If these naibs were corrupt, if these nawab were corrupt, why did they allow for the burial of Homs? Why did they not retrieve it? So I have no cause to believe that they were corruptive people or liars.
Next question. So please can you explain how you have deduced that the authority which is granted on the basis of transmitting, interpretation and knowledge base, rather than things like effort, sincerity and character?
So I am justifying this particular authority notion based on the tradition and traditional texts. So obviously when the traditional text has an authority structure, you have to give their argument as to what is it based on, and is it logically consistent, or is there a flaw in the logic? So we stated, no, it's logically consistent, but it falters at this point when we say authority is for the faqih as a faqih. We are saying, no, authority is for the faqih in terms of his accuracy in interpreting the want of God. So that's the distinction we make. Yeah.
So the whole idea of effort behind it, so the struggle of, the sincere effort or the character of the person, does that even come into question?
No, the bottom line is accuracy. Sincerity, good conduct, good character, as Imam Khomeini and others will tell you in their work, these are all societal considerations. Yes, societal, whether it's a man, one man or 10 people, whether he is just and all this, these are just societal considerations. They have nothing to do with the accuracy and ijtihad. Ijtihad is all about accuracy. The authority is given to accurate understanding, nothing else.
Do you think the idea of jurists or mediators came from the same structure of the Arab Bedouins? So you mentioned Prophet Muhammad at the end of your lecture. The Prophet Muhammad was the elected person within his tribe to mediate. Do you think if it was any different, it would be a different Islamic different for Islam now? So for example, the UK has different levels of court, and globally we have courts. So do you think it's this the system, the hierarchy is based on the Prophet mediating his smaller tribe with the other tribes.
Well, this is exactly what we are saying, that it began in its humble way, within its own context. And with the passage of time, it's a human phenomena. Human society's evolution, authority structure, these are human phenomena. There's no divinity about it. At this point in time, we are supposed to evolve to institutional-based authorities. So the court system adjudicates now. Yeah? Of course, it was naturally to flow to this level.
Okay, so I think there's a question which has come from Pakistan as well. So I think it's referring to the Ariza question which was asked, I think yesterday. Is it more of a subcontinent thing, or is the Ariza also prevalent in the Arabian Peninsula as well?
Right, so the hadith is from Imam Bakir, from Imam Sadiq, from Imam Hassan al-Askari. So I assume the questioner is asking the physical practice of it, not the origination of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the physical practice is prevalent within Iran, isn't it? People go to Jamkaran and they put Ariza in that well, right? And we have the ahadith. So Iraqis also have it. Because of this hadith, go to the grave of Imam Hussein and then place it anywhere. And I think when you look into the shrines as well, you see little pieces and so it might be Arizas. So it's practiced within the Shia world. But where is it more prevalent? My guess is as good as anybody else's. I can't say Iran or Pakistan or India.
I'm really glad we had that question, and it's come from so far away. I'm sure you'll agree. We've got plenty of listeners. If anybody does want to listen to the other lectures, that are available on the YouTube link and on shaykharif.com. You can catch the lectures live if you put /live and ask any further questions from them. Thank you very much. We'll now have
Adhan?
Salam.
Salam, yeah. Adhan, yeah.